Superintendent.
How you doing, Marty?
Mr. Madden, hello.
How you doing?
How are you? Good.
I can't wait for this presentation. I'm going to see.
Seems brighter in here.
I think you got your eyes open, that's why.
Maybe.
Instead of sleeping here.
Wish I was sleeping.
So I didn't sleep well last night.
Neither did I.
Did you? Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the work session of the board to order. And I think we have one item on it. So I spent the time to introduce.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Yvonne Colo and Janelle Phillips. They are coordinators, or actually supervisors of the STEM and science programs here in Calvert County. So,
Welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to get started with a video for Next Generation Science Standards. So we definitely thank you for allowing us this opportunity to share with you what is going on with the changes in science. And I would also like to just acknowledge Dave Nelson. He's our science teacher specialist, so he's just here to give us support for this presentation. So we'll get started with the video and then we'll go through our presentation.
In today's ever-technologically advancing world, we are living at the speed of science. And we need to educate our students to be scientifically literate, ready to ask questions, define problems, investigate, analyze data, construct explanations, and design solutions, ready to take on the future.
We want to have lots of different people pursue science and engineering careers because their different backgrounds and different perspectives on things move us forward in terms of our understanding, in terms of what we can do, in terms of our technology.
The Next Generation Science Standards provide an important opportunity to improve not only science education, but also student achievement, reflecting a new vision for American science education, creating a context for learning, comprehending the core knowledge and ideas, and engaging in scientific and engineering practices helps to prepare students for broader understanding and deeper levels of scientific and engineering investigation later on in high school, college, and beyond.
I'm encouraged that the tripartite organization of the NGSS with its core ideas and then those practices that are engineering and science, in addition to the cross-cutting concepts, really start to imply that design is very important.
By states, for states. The Next Generation Science Standards were developed by a team of experts and stakeholders in science and engineering, K-12 and higher education, and industry, in an open, collaborative, state-led process.
As the team lead, I coordinate the activities that go along with reviewing the standards, engineering standards as they come out, maintaining communication with our stakeholders to keep them abreast of times when there will be information released about the project.
The standards are internationally benchmarked against countries whose students perform well in math and science.
If we have a common definition of what it means to be prepared, what's our responsibility to prepare students, what are we responsible to offer our children as opportunities? And these standards help us paint that picture.
Implementing improved K-12 science standards will better prepare high school graduates to succeed in college and careers. Enabling employers to hire workers with strong science-based knowledge and skills, critical thinking, and inquiry-based problem solving. educating students for the future, educating students at the speed of science. The next generation science standards, 4 states, 5 states.
So just a little introduction, just to say that the Next Generation Science Standards is definitely a part of the movement to increase rigor, to ensure that students are college and career ready. We know that definitely you've heard a lot from the English and the math. We know they may rule, but science rocks. So Next Generation Science Standards here, we get to our PowerPoint.
Is she right there? Where your cursor
Where I'm
is?
at?
Yep. Thank you.
So one thing I want to say that the Common Core state standards in the movement, Next Generation is not a part of the Common Core, but it's a part of the movement for making changes to ensure that all our students nationwide are receiving the same type of instruction and having the same type of rigor across the nation.
So you mean it was not because of the work done on Common Core that the next generation standards were developed? That was a separate?
This is separate. Yeah. So Common Core addresses math, English language arts, and then disciplinary literacy. So reading like a historian or reading like a scientist. But the content of science, this is separate. This came through state-led organizations working with higher education, and so it was separate from the process.
Had they been doing this for many years? I mean, has this been do we know how long, when they started working on this?
They put this together, they did a tremendous amount of work in about 2 years. So they have been working on it for a while, but it did not start at the same time that Common Core.
So when you look at the trends in science and the research behind science and all these trends, the work's been going on for a while as to what students should be learning in science, how much depth should they learn in science. So that is not new. I think with the Common Core, it was a catalyst to ensure that now with the National Research Council and all these other scientific organizations, I think it was a catalyst to say this is the perfect time to make sure we're moving at the same time Common Core is moving.
Okay.
So when the word Common Core is used, it's really talking about math and
and
English and disciplinary literacy.
And like Common Core, this is not a federally mandated program. It's not coming down from us from the Department of Education, or it is.
No, it was
No.
adopted by states, like Maryland State Department of Education did adopt and approve to accept this as the guides for us.
And Maryland actually was part of one of the lead states. So Maryland has been involved in this process from the beginning. So Maryland was one of the first states to adopt the standards because they've been involved with it.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're interested to hear if this mean a change to our curriculum, and does this mean a change to our assessments?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right.
And next gen is going to be tied to assessment in science. So that's another difference for a lot of other science programs that have come through. All right. Clicker.
Okay, so the next generation science standards, so they are performance expectations, so the document itself, they are performance expectations focused on the nexus of 3 dimensions of science. In those 3 dimensions, you have your cross-cutting concepts, which Janelle will go into as we move through the slides, our disciplinary core ideas, and the practices, okay? The performance expectations that require students to demonstrate proficiency, and they're designed to lead to a coherent understanding of the practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas. So the main thing here, they're performance expectations. So they're not given to us in the form of a curriculum. So just like math and English, the state will have to do a gap analysis to see how does these performance expectations fit in with our current curriculum, what needs to come out and what needs to be added. And that's just starting because they were just adopted in March.
Oh, okay.
So we're at the beginning process of what math and English is already done.
Yes.
Because we've been talking about it, though.
You've been talking about it for a while. It's been, because the drafts have been out for the last 2 years.
Okay.
So we knew it was coming. We have been reviewing the drafts, but now it's officially adopted, so the work has officially begun. And once again, they're not isolated inquiry and content standards. There is not a curriculum, and it's not meant to be used, not meant to limit the use of practices and cross-cutting concepts of instruction, and it is not designed to be separate or isolated experiences. So as we go a little deeper into it, you'll see that the purpose is to make sure that the science content and the science practices are totally integrated and not taught in isolation. That's really a large part of this movement.
Is that how it was done before? They weren't integrated?
Well, historically or traditionally, should I say, when if you think about science class, the teacher traditionally would teach the science practices, teach you how to measure, how to, use the trip beam balance, how to use the instruments that happened in the beginning of the school year. Mm-hmm. And it was not related to content. It was simply related to, hey, this is how we do these things in science. So the standards are saying, let's not do that. Let's go ahead and start teaching about mass and density and show them how to use the equipment as you're moving along.
Okay.
So it should be more of an integrated approach and not teaching in isolation without content and then come back to it. So do it all at the same time. So the conceptual shifts, K through 12 science education should reflect the interconnected nature of science as it is practiced and experienced in the real world. And that's kind of responding to your question. Like, science should not be just learning these concepts. It really should have some real world connections. It should be integrated and not just memorizing facts about science. And definitely that crosses over into the same thing related to STEM, because STEM in real world is obviously a very strong push as well. Next generation science standards are not student performance expectations. And they continue to emphasize that because they don't want you to get this document and say, hey, go for it. These are the expectations, but the curriculum and how it's taught definitely is going to be up to the states and the counties as they start and move through that gap analysis. The science concepts build, so it's definitely more of a progression of K through 12. In some cases, when you think about science, you may teach life science, you stop. Teach earth science, you stop. Teach physical science, you stop. They're saying it really should be a progression. You really should be teaching it all along. Teach what's grade appropriate for the students at that time, but the concept should not be left behind until 2 or 3 years later. And that would be a change for us as it relates to the curriculum that we have to address. The next generation science standards focus on deeper understanding of content as well as application of content. And I think that's the same for even the Common Core. It's like, let's reduce what they are learning and go deeper to make sure they have a deeper understanding of the foundation of things, which allow them to learn almost anything. So they're going to reduce how much we're learning, but go deeper in the concepts that we have chosen. Science and engineering is integrated into next generation science standards, so that is new because engineering has not traditionally been a part of a science curriculum. The engineering design, the thinking behind engineering, that is now an explicit part of this new document. And next generation science standards are designed to prepare students for college, career, and citizenship.
What do you mean? You mean like materials engineering? Just having kids understand how chemistry can affect, bridges or something like that?
It's really more of the engineering process, the thinking like an engineer, going through a process instead of going, science, once again, we're talking traditionally, you follow steps, you draw a conclusion, and then you're done. Engineering is a process of thinking that allows you to reflect and make changes along the way. So it's really more of the practices of an engineer, more so than the content of any particular type of engineering.
And there would be times where after students have learned about, adaptations, they might be asked to create something for an animal to be able to do. So engineering becomes a component of a design that they'd be designing something that way. All right, so this is getting kind of into the meat of what it is that the science standards say. And in looking at it, they have separated out, but they're very integrated in how we're going to be moving through teaching. But there are the science and engineering practices, And then there's the cross-cutting concepts, so that would be patterns, it would be scale, it would be those bigger ideas that you see in all different areas of science. And then the disciplinary core ideas, which would be the things that we used to think of what you teach. Those would be, the correlation would be to the indicators in the state curriculum. That's the specific content, I guess, that you would be looking at. But big push that it's all connected. You're not learning one thing separate from the other. So when you're learning your content, you're bringing in those cross-cutting ideas and you're bringing in those science and engineering practices. So you're doing science.
Does doing mean applying? In other words, you actually get them, like with plans, measuring the oxygen in the water or something. Does that, you mean you're actually going to be doing more application in the classroom?
That would be the shift that we're moving through. Yeah, the science and engineering practices are really about a kid with inquiry and engaging in arguments from evidence and those kinds of things that you have to be doing in science and engaging in it deeply to be able to do those things. Okay. So these are the cross-cutting concepts, and again, this is just something that as you're teaching a specific piece to earth science or to life science or physical science, you're looking at the bigger things that connect the different parts of science together and making sure kids are aware of those connections, that it's not in isolation.
And just to add, so they're looking here to say that you have patterns in earth science, you have patterns in life science. So they want kids to understand that patterns exist in science. Once again, this is more explicit teaching and more explicit in what you're saying so that kids are making connection to all of the subject areas as well. So these cross-cutting concepts here are meant to help students make connections to science no matter where they are. So they can relate to patterns, they can relate to energy, and so on.
So how they came up with the disciplinary core ideas, because we said we're going to teach less so that we can get into it deeper, more deeply, and have those science and engineering practices, is they look to see what are the really big things that kids need to have related to science. And this, was definitely lots of discussion with lots of different groups, and they look to see, what are those key things that if you don't have, you wouldn't be considered a kind of scientifically literate person. And then teachable and learnable, and those increasing levels of rigor, because we are going to see things starting, actually Maryland is pre-K, so we'll start with this in pre-K, moving pre-K through 12. So what can we start working on with our pre-Kers and then build upon from there. So these would be the disciplinary core ideas, and you have these in front of you, but physical science gets broken down into some larger topics. This is a different way of, you don't see physics and chemistry here separately. It's more the concepts that are embedded in those disciplines. So it's trying to look at those bigger pictures and helping kids make those bigger connections. So those would be physical science?
I've heard it said that the new generation science standards say that there's going to be less content, but I've heard accusations that there seems to be actually more content. So when you're moving through can you speak about that, speak to that, and then also like what's not going to be taught that that might have fallen if you had to make a choice on where to do a cutoff.
Well, I would say what we're looking at, and we're still not at a place we don't have all the answers from the state as exactly how they want to move forward with things. So I can't speak to that exactly. Because, for example, environmental literacy is still a component of Maryland science instruction. Environmental literacy was left out, or it doesn't get as deep as Maryland has gone. Well, environmental literacy is going to stay in Maryland as these come in as well. So states, even though we've adopted these, I don't know that we're necessarily going to, if we have something good in place, we're going to keep working through it. I think that there is still a lot of content. I think it's more interconnected, though, so as you're teaching, it's easier to fuse it together than maybe the state curriculum before. And it doesn't go maybe to the level of specificity when you're talking about an assessment that the state curriculum previously had gone. So it's still the concept, it's still the understanding, but the little memorize facts are not what we're going for.
And
like we may
the
have
gap
been before.
analysis by the state has not been done yet. I mean, that's what they're in the process of doing, and we're in the process of also looking at it from our end to see how does the Maryland State curriculum match up with next generation science standards. So that is, like I said, we're still in the very early stages of that.
Yes.
See where the increased rigor is probably more on the writing component and the showing that you understand
It's the thinking.
as opposed to the spitting up, memorized facts.
Yes, it's what can you do with the information now that you've got it, not just the information.
Yeah, the emphasis from Common Core and from Next Generation is really on the practices, which we're going to talk about, but it's really the practices of science. The content it's obviously is important, and the content will always be important, but access to content it also has increased. So now it's about how do you use this content, what do you do with it, and that is really more of the push with this than anything else.
All right, so in life sciences, again, bigger ticket items, I guess you would say. That would be life sciences. And again, you have that. I'm not going to read it to you. Earth and space sciences. Now, there's definitely in next generation science standards, they're bringing in more of that human impact and what are humans, doing and looking at that piece. So that you see in earth science, you see it in life science. It's looking at what are we as a society, doing as we create one thing. What are the, as you look at an engineering solution, what are the outcomes that were maybe unintended and things like that. Getting kids to think bigger picture.
And as Janelle is going through this, you'll notice that you'll see life, earth, and space. And then you have life and physical. You don't see environmental. Environmental is not an overarching
Separate.
theme, or it's not a disciplinary core ideas. It is embedded throughout all of them. And that's different because Maryland State curriculum does have environmental indicators pulled out separately.
And then we actually have engineering design indicators, and those are connected in with the different areas of science as we look through to do instruction. But that's different. That is something that we haven't had as far as science teachers haven't been asked to bring in engineering. So this is an area that we're working with, staff development and things like that to support our teachers, because if we're going to be asking kids to do it, our teachers need to have a firm understanding of it. But so this is different. I think it's exciting. Because the concept of creating a scientifically literate individual, this engineering and the thinking and the critical thinking really it supports all of that.
So a question on that. We've been doing Common Core all the time, and one of the concerns about Common Core is teachers learning to teach differently, not just different subject matter, but teaching differently. And that's what is going to happen here in science as well.
Yes, I have a lot of work ahead of me to help, with especially elementary teachers. This is a different level, and it's bumping up the level of rigor. So there's a lot of professional development that is going to be needed, and it has to be put in place because we have to do it well. This is not something we have to do it well.
Do you know what it looks like?
What a classroom looks like that's Common Core? I would say. I'm sorry, next generation science standards. I would say that it's a classroom that involves a lot of inquiry. It's a classroom that has kids talking and discussing and wrestling with the concepts themselves. It's a classroom that has students designing models to get their thinking to paper, and then when two people have different models, working through to say, wait, what are you talking about here, and think those kinds of things. So I think it connects in very nicely with the Common Core. It's getting kids really engaged in the science.
And
Have the background to do this.
Well,
Certainly the ones that are here now may not.
I would say that is something that, again, that's a professional development piece for me, that I have to make
That's
sure
a
that
massive job.
teachers are fully comfortable with the content, because you can't teach something you're not comfortable with,
Right.
at least not well. So, I'm sure everybody had that experience that the night before their first year they're doing something, and we can't have that. So the professional development is already starting. We're putting things in place for our teachers. And again, I go back to, though, it's very exciting, the thought of having those scientifically literate students coming through our system. The choices that people have to make in their real world every day, so many of them are science related, whether it's you decide to buy a hybrid or you're going to get an SUV, whether it's the heat pump you're going to put in your home, whether there's just the clothes you're going to choose to wear for the day. There's those science connections, and this is to support kids to be able to do that.
So another example of some of the changes that are already occurring. In a traditional science class, the teacher would go through, introduce the lesson, let's say a lesson on cells, they go through, they introduce it, they give them the vocabulary list that goes with it, they follow through that, and then they would give them the procedures to follow to now look at the cell under the microscope. So some things that teachers are already doing, they're just automatically starting with the lab and just asking them, what do you see? What do you observe? And they work it backwards. So now when they get to the actual instruction of it, they can ask questions. They now reflect back on the lab that we did. Tell me, how did that connect to what we're learning? So that is a shift, and that shift is already occurring. So the shift is going away from telling and now less doing. You ask about, are they doing science? They're doing more initially in the questioning, because questioning is going to be a large part of the shift for teachers. They have to ask more questions and do less telling. And the questions have to be guided, it has to be very strategic to get the students to where you need them to go. But that is a part of the shift. How can we start lessons without the traditional define the word, having them looking at videos and just have them make observations, having the students have, materials that's not going to blow up the building, but have them explore with that enough to say, oh wow, when I mix these two colors, this is what happened. Traditionally, you would say, hey, when you mix red and yellow and blue, it gets green. We tell them and then we show them. So now we're trying not to tell them everything. Let's show them first and then ask more questions. So that's the natural part of the shift as well.
I think our teachers are using a lot more simulations and things that they can get virtual labs on the computer so that students can work through, some of those processes through trial and error, which is then in the end when they figure it out it'll resonate more so than somebody telling them that.
Yeah, I can see automation or digital learning, as we were talking about, being more and more important, and all the way down to elementary school. So if you could be thinking, along on how's the best way we can do this, even if it's in little pilot areas, because I think we're all moving that way, especially in the simulation, and I'm all for frog dissection software as opposed to frog dissection, that kind of thing. So just things like this in science, it's tremendous. I think they say that you could teach a person better using some of the software that's out there now. Anyway.
So the science and engineering practices, this has definitely been our push for this year as it relates to moving out the next generation science standards. And it also has a nice connection with Common Core. So the language for science teachers, and when they're in department meetings or when they're in their school staff meetings, there is shared language. So the practices provide shared language so that students should be able to transition from one class to the next and embrace these practices. So asking questions and defining problems. Once again, I know this is happening in math and in reading as well. Developing and using models, planning and carrying out investigations. And the word planning is underlined because, once again, traditionally a student would carry an investigation, but they're just following steps. There's really no thinking behind it. So we're looking at how can we encourage teachers to allow students to do some of the planning. Analyzing and interpreting data. Using math is obviously a big one. Constructing explanations and designing solutions. Engaging in argument from evidence. Obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. So although they are all our focus, we put most of our focus and our support this year on engaging in argument from evidence, because we know that is what's happening in English, and we know that math is also using more evidence when they're going through their mathematical processes. So that one has been a big one for us, and we've been providing support on that with the claims, evidence, reasoning, and rebuttal. So it's going to be a progression of this whole process, claim, evidence, and reasoning. But we chose that one to focus on, once again, all of the practices are a focus, but that one is the main focus. Because even when you think about staff meetings, realistically, the conversations are more geared towards math and English. But if they're crossover, then teachers feel more engaged and they're able to collaborate a little more. So we're learning from the English teachers, they're learning from us, and then ideally we'll have a common language for students to move through this process. Obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information is also a big push. We're looking at, we're definitely increasing writing in science. I know systemically we're looking at a writing progression for the entire county, and definitely that also addressed the disciplinary literacy for Common Core. So reading, writing, engaging in argument from evidence, did more discussion because you have to have more discourse in class in order to engage in argument. So obviously the argument as far as discourse in class and argument in writing. So that is our push using the practices.
That's why the teachers, now that there's going to be room full of questions, they're going to have to know their stuff.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also having the ability to have the questions to ask students too. And there's things out there that were discovered yesterday.
Yeah.
So
We're not going to know.
But how do we obtain that information?
Right.
And how do we support a child to get that answer?
Like the rings of Saturn that they just were taking the pictures of. It was fascinating. Yeah.
So here in this Venn diagram, you can see the nice overlap between the math, ELA, and the science. And it's really just designed to show you that although there are 3 separate subjects, there's a tremendous amount of overlap that students should be engaging in these practices in all of their content areas. So,
English language, are those
are
Common
Common
Core?
Core. Mhm.
This is my favorite chart. It should be everywhere. I love this.
yes. And the next slide, or the next sheet that you have, you can see it more. It's a little easier to read, but you can
But not
see.
as fun.
Not as fun. So here's the overlap, and then the next chart shows you exactly what the Common Core says, shows you what the STEM practices says, and it'll show you what Next Gen says. And you can see there the language is very common, it's very similar. And that's what, in our STEM meetings, we've been using this. When we have our Department of Instruction meeting, we've been using this because I think it helps reduce the anxiety of teachers as well, because the burden is not on one subject area for most of these practices. There are always going to be things that's specific to your discipline, but there's so many things that cross over. And that really is one of the objectives for Common Core and Next Gen, is that students should not be feeling like they're leaving one place, going to another. They should be making connections on all levels during their schooling process.
Right. We don't want to hear kids say, "What? It's science class. Why are we doing math?" That's become something that they're just used to. So this would be Maryland's. NGSS is more, it's not the whole nation, not everybody's adopted it, but this is then Maryland's kind of response. When they talked with the state board, this was their plan for implementation, so we thought we would share that with you. I think I'm thrilled to see the first one because that's so important to me. And then obviously college and career ready. The pre-K through 12, rigorous and high quality, is something that's definitely going to be, a challenge. But it's just so important that it does layer upon. The research is telling us the hard concepts, you don't wait until they're older to do the hard concepts. You start earlier, and multiple exposures is the way to help get that understanding. So working on that, and then making sure we don't lose STEM as well, because we want to keep that. Maryland's wants to be a leader related to STEM, and they're working with partnerships with various agencies. So we will get more information from that as it comes from the state. And then we just thought we would share with you the timeline from MSDE. As you can see, we're still in the beginning stages of all of this. Next Gen is trailing behind Common Core by a couple of years. So they are looking at And I think they're also, science heard from their ELA and math peers, don't rush it, do it well, and do it if it takes a little longer, but do it well. So that's right now why they're suggesting that, you know, we still would be 3 years away from full implementation.
They have scope and sequence already?
No.
No.
They do not have a scope and sequence. So
Because that would be
No.
slippery too with science, because that would change.
We,
Every
you know,
day.
we have what NextGen has proposed for the grades, or the grade bands for middle and high school, but we haven't heard what the state's response is to that. You know, there still will be MSA in 5th and 8th grade, so how we arrange things, you know, we're still waiting for their guidance. So. But we're getting started and we're diving in with the practices because the practices are the practices. It doesn't matter if they put, you know, this disciplinary core idea in 3rd grade and this one in 4th grade. The practices are still the practices, and so that's been our focus. We started with middle and high, and I'm working my way into elementary more so, but we did focus on middle and high to get started with this ball rolling because elementary is dealing with reading and math right now and everything being new for them. So me diving in with next gen science on top of new reading and math seemed a little much. And again, we want to do it well. So elementary I'm working, but it's slower because they are doing the math and the reading.
We're also doing more articulation. Like she said, this year we started with middle school and high school. We'll add in elementary because our high school teachers, they really are very good with the content. Okay, I mean, we're working on them, making sure they're not teaching content in isolation, but their content level is pretty high. And most of the high school teachers are tenured. They've been here for a very long time, which is really good. So we're looking at staff development that we can use our own resources to help middle and elementary schools as well. So that's something else that we're looking at doing as we're
So you're
planning.
designing the staff, the professional development? It's
Yes, we
you,
work
right?
together. Middle
And
school and high
Mr.
school has
Nelson
worked
helps us
together.
Right,
Very
but I
nice.
mean, it's Calvert County,
Yeah.
teaching our own, we're not using any kind of state,
Well, next, the National Science Teacher Association, they have done a lot of work to support rolling out next generation science standards. So they have webinars, they have lots of support. So there's a lot of research
Okay,
out
good.
there that we're
Right.
definitely using as also as a support system for us. So we're designing it for our teachers, but we definitely have resources that are out there from the National Research Council, National Science Teacher Association, and all of the organizations that have been a part of this movement. So they have done work to give us support with that. How to read it, how to interpret it. So there are a lot of steps involved here.
And there are groups working right now trying to get, you know, you asked what does it look like. There are groups that are working and taking, you know, videos of teachers doing this because that's the thing. Teachers say, what does it look like? And they want to see someone else doing it. So that work is in process. Again, we're lagging behind Common Core a couple of years.
Probably a good
So,
thing.
so we don't have, you know, we're not at that place. We're still more at the beginnings, but we just wanted to share our excitement of what's coming our way and the places that science is going.
So one of the things that we've discussed in relation to Common Core and elementary education is that instead of being general educators, that our elementary school teachers need to be more subject matter experts, and this just drives the point home. So is there consideration right now for restructuring how elementary school looks?
Well, I think it has changed. If you go from 3rd to 5th grade, you no longer have a generalist elementary school teacher. They actually have gone into disciplinary teams. And you might have, and that's across all the elementary schools. Some elementary schools have done it all the way down to 1st grade.
Really? Wow.
But not all. I mean, this was a decision that the principals made. But definitely 3rd through 5th grade. So you have multiple teachers that they might be teaching social studies and science, and then you might have the math. Well, actually, it'd probably be social studies and English.
Yeah.
There's
And
lots of
then-
different models out there.
But there's a lot of different models,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it depends on the school. But we really are looking more into disciplinary teams, yes.
And would that change our staffing plans?
Not yet. It could. It could possibly, but as of now, we've been able to work through it. But these are the things that are coming down the pike that we're going to have to take a really hard look at. And that is a huge departure from how we have done business in the past, so. But because of these great people out here, they're doing great things with staff development.
So we're hopeful that we'll be able to return, and when we return, we would like to show you at least a few of the documents, because it's obviously a very detailed document, but just to show you how they have set it up from their end and give you more details about it, because this is only just truly an introduction of what it is. So we would like to show you how they have broken it down and some of the progressions that they have proposed.
And as we partner more, that's my shtick, you know, I want us to partner more with the organizations that we have in our county or locally, so that these kids can get that practical experience that we're trying to teach them. You know, I could even think Anne Marie Gardens, the recycling art, the recycled art can very much be part of the science curriculum.
That
you know.
actually our second graders, as a component of their chest packs trip to the Appeal landfill, go to Amory Gardens and do.
Oh, that's right. No,
yeah.
I knew that.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
saying that can be considered a science application, you know, in essence, you know, that they're dealing with the you know, talking about what plastics are and how it's recyclable, you know, and things like that. Is that a
And
word?
we have, Ms. Highsmith just signed off for 2 of our schools to become STEM innovation schools, and that's Huntingtown High School and Calvert High School. And the other 2 will become STEM innovation schools in the spring. But what that means is that the Maryland Business Roundtable, their organization is providing access to those schools to have access to their resources online and to professionals in the field that will come and co-teach with the teacher and bring those real life experiences into the classroom.
That's excellent.
And so that's something that will also help all teachers. It's for science, math, English, technology, everyone. But that's new, and they are working on, because obviously our partnerships here outside of Pax River, which even the professionals from Pax River, I must say, sometimes it's a challenge for them to get to Northern and to Huntingtown. And then a lot of our other resources are definitely environmentally based. So we're looking to hopefully get some more resources from the Applied Physics Lab and some of the other places that are more, you know, some of the northern part of Maryland to partner with us. So that was just approved. We met with the STEMnet organizers just yesterday at Calvert High School. So that should also add in the application piece for students to really use what their knowledge base.
Because I think that's going to be a big part of education in the future as well.
And some of the challenges that they are presenting, like from the Applied Physics Lab, where students, they are actual challenges that the scientists are working on.
Right.
So they're encouraging students to come up with some of the resolutions to solve some of these challenges. So that's very exciting.
That is. Thank you, ladies.
Very good, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do we need to go back into executive session, I guess? You have a motion?
I make a motion for the Board of Education of Calvert County to go into closed session to discuss legal, to consult with counsel and negotiations, to discuss negotiations as permitted by the Maryland Open Meetings Act, Section 10508A1, 7, and 9 of the State Government Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, and Section 10503 of the State Government Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. We're in executive session.